You think you understand how your own mind works. You make choices. You weigh options. You decide. Fine. But then why do you procrastinate when it matters most? Why do you delay the thing you care about and do something you do not even enjoy? What stops your priorities from controlling your behavior? Most people do not ask. They say things like discipline or motivation or I am just lazy. They repeat words. But that is not an answer. That is just blaming the person who is confused. When you really ask why, you find something uncomfortable. You do not choose as much as you think you do. Let me show you. Start with something simple. You sit down to do the important thing, the thing you have been avoiding all week. The email, the report, the application, the project that sits in the back of your mind like unfinished business. You open the laptop, you pull up the document, your hands are on the keyboard, and then something happens. Not a big thing, a tiny thing. You check one message, you open one tab, you look up one detail just to get started properly, and suddenly you are gone. 10 minutes turns into 30, 30 turns into 2 hours. You resurface later with nothing done and a strange feeling that you were barely there for any of it. That is the part people do not talk about. The weird part is not that you procrastinate. The weird part is that you can watch yourself doing it and still not stop. You are not asleep. You are not confused. You are sitting there fully aware, and the behavior drifts anyway. Like your actions are happening slightly in front of your ability to steer. So what is that? If you are the one making choices, why does it feel like your choices are made without you? Most people treat procrastination like a character flaw, a weakness, a personal defect. But procrastination does not behave like a character flaw. It behaves like a system. It triggers under specific conditions. It follows patterns. It repeats with precision. And the worse the stakes are, the more reliable the pattern becomes. That is not morality. That is machinery. Here is the first crack in the old model. The mind that makes plans is not the same mind that acts. And that is not philosophy. It is structural. There is a part of you that can describe what matters, and a different part of you that selects what happens next. One narrates, one drives, and procrastination is what it looks like when the narrator thinks it is in control, but the driver does not agree. Now watch what happens next. Because once you see procrastination as a disagreement inside decision-making, the whole thing becomes predictable. Not excusable, not inspirational, predictable. Let's build it step by step. Here is the first mechanism. If you want the outcome, why will you not do the action? The normal answer is simple. You are weighing costs and benefits. Work now, reward later. Procrastination is what happens when the cost feels too high or the reward feels too far away. That sounds reasonable. That sounds like the kind of thing a rational mind would do. But then you notice something strange. Your preferences change depending on time. Not a little. They flip. Let me make this concrete. Imagine a simple choice. Option A, you get $100 today. Option B, you get $110 tomorrow. Most people take the 100 today. Not everyone, but most. And they can justify it. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. I could use it now. It is close enough. Fine. Now, watch what happens when the future gets pushed away. Option A, you get $100 in 30 days. Option B, you get $110 in 31 days. Suddenly, most people choose the 110. Think about that. The gap is still 1 day. The logic is identical. But the preference flips. That means value is not stable. That means your mind does not have one consistent preference system. It has a system that changes its standards depending on immediacy. So the future does not just feel less valuable, it becomes a different category of reality. A story, a simulation, a place that does not press on you. And when a reward becomes a story, the present wins by default. Because the present is not a story. The present is real. It has friction. It has consequences that can be felt right now. And that implies something about procrastination. Procrastination is not the mind choosing the wrong thing. It is the mind using a different valuation rule the moment now becomes involved. Your plan was built under one rule. Then you arrive in the moment and the rule changes. That is why procrastination feels like betrayal. It is not one mind failing to be consistent. It is two systems using different currencies. One currency is outcomes, the other currency is immediacy. And you can see how the system thinks just by listening to the language it produces. People do not procrastinate in hours. They procrastinate in later. Later today, after lunch, tonight, tomorrow morning, Monday. That word is the hiding place. Because later is not a time. It is a category. It is the category where consequences do not press on you. That is why the same delay can feel responsible. Even when you have watched that delay ruin you before. Because your mind does not treat a future cost like a cost. It treats it like a note, a reminder, a thought, a maybe. So when you say later, you are not solving the problem, you are relocating it. You are moving it into the category where it cannot touch you yet. And that relocation feels like control. It feels like you made an intelligent adjustment. It feels like you are still steering. But watch what the system just traded. It traded a discomfort you can feel now for a discomfort you can only imagine. And imagination is weak. Imagination does not create pressure. Imagination does not create urgency. So the driver has no reason to move. That is why procrastination feels so calm at first. Because the moment you postpone, the pressure drops. The world gets quieter, the narrator relaxes, and the driver learns the lesson the narrator keeps missing. Avoidance works. Not long term, but it works right now. And in the decision system that governs behavior, right now is the only language that matters. And you can see the result in the calendar. Sunday night suddenly becomes sacred. All week the task felt distant, theoretical, tolerable. Then the deadline gets close enough to feel real. And the entire valuation system flips. The same work that felt impossible on Wednesday afternoon becomes urgent and obvious on Sunday night. Not because your personality changed, because later stopped existing. Or look at how many fresh start promises the mind produces. New week, new month, new year. As if time itself can reset the mechanism. As if the problem lives in the calendar instead of the architecture that reads it. That is why procrastination can feel like you are waiting for the right moment to become a different person. A version of you with clean energy and no friction. But the right moment never arrives. It only collapses into now, with the same driver still selecting the next move. Once you see that, a lot of behavior stops looking mysterious. Because the driver is not asking what matters most. It is asking what matters now. And now has a brutal advantage. Because now can punish you instantly. And later cannot. But procrastination is not only about rewards. It is not just pleasure beating responsibility. That is the fake version. The real version is more mechanical. It is not pleasure you are choosing. It is relief. Now here's where it gets strange. Why does the smallest distraction win? Why does checking one small thing turn into losing the entire day? If the task is truly important, why does it not simply override everything else? Most people answer with a simple story. Distractions feel good. Work feels hard. But that is not deep enough. Because procrastination does not always look like pleasure. Sometimes it looks like cleaning. Sometimes it looks like organizing. Sometimes it looks like researching the task endlessly without doing it. Sometimes it looks like preparing forever. That tells you the competition is not between work and fun. The competition is between friction and escape. Because what procrastination is really doing is removing a specific kind of discomfort. Not physical discomfort, cognitive discomfort. The feeling of being unsure, the feeling of starting badly, the feeling of not knowing what you will produce, the feeling of facing a gap between your standards and what you can deliver right now. This is why procrastination loves tasks with one specific shape, tasks with unclear success conditions, a report that could be rewritten forever, a project where you do not know what good looks like yet, an application where one sentence feels like it might decide your future. The driver does not fear work. It fears ambiguity. Because ambiguity means you might start and not know how to finish. You might begin badly. You might get stuck. You might discover you cannot produce what you expected. And that possibility feels like exposure. So the system searches for something cleaner, something with a closed loop, something where effort produces a guaranteed endpoint. That is why procrastination so often disguises itself as preparation. You do research, you organize, you clean, you make the workspace perfect, you rewrite the plan, you adjust the formatting. All of that feels productive because it is motion without vulnerability. It gives the narrator something to point to. See, I'm working. But the driver knows what it is really doing. It is choosing certainty. Because these tasks do not threaten identity. They do not risk failure. They do not confront the gap between your standards and your output. They give you a small win you can finish quickly. And that win produces the same currency again. Relief. The uncomfortable feeling dissolves. And the more often that pattern happens, the more the driver learns a brutal rule. If uncertainty rises, switch to something finishable. Not because it helps, because it feels controllable. So procrastination is not idleness. It is a system constantly searching for the easiest way to stop feeling exposed. Notice something important. Procrastination often starts before you begin. Sometimes just looking at the task creates resistance, not because the task is impossible, because the system predicts something. It predicts effort. It predicts confusion. It predicts exposure. It predicts a loss of control. And it reacts the way systems react to predicted loss. It avoids. So procrastination is not only delaying work, it is avoiding a predicted internal state. Distractions are not chosen because they are amazing. They are chosen because they erase that state instantly. They provide a clean exit. They replace uncertainty with something simpler, a feed, a tab, a trivial task with a clear endpoint. Not because the distraction is meaningful, because it is controllable. That is the currency again, control. Procrastination is what happens when the mind chooses a smaller, immediate certainty over a larger, delayed uncertainty. And once relief becomes the currency, you can predict what wins. The smallest action that reduces friction wins. Even if it destroys the day, even if it destroys what you claim you care about. Because the driver does not operate on meaning, it operates on pressure. Pressure in the present. Which raises the next question. If you can see the pattern, why does seeing it not stop it? Here is where it gets worse. If you know tomorrow is coming, why does that knowledge not help? Why does awareness of consequences not force the behavior to change? Because you assume awareness is the steering wheel. You assume the mind works like this. Evaluate the situation. Choose. Act. But procrastination exposes something else. The mind does not treat future consequences like real consequences. It treats them like conceptual consequences. It treats later like a story you tell yourself, not like a place you are going to arrive. So, procrastination depends on one strange belief. That future you will handle it. That future you will be more capable, more focused, more willing than current you. And the mind makes this belief feel reasonable. It says things you have heard 1,000 times. I will start Monday. I will do it after lunch. I just need to research first. I will do it properly when I have time. Think about how perfect those sentences are. They do not sound like failure. They sound like responsibility. They sound like planning. They sound like control. They turn delay into a strategy. They turn avoidance into intelligence. But those sentences are not plans. They are exit ramps. They are how the system keeps the narrator calm while the driver escapes. And the moment you say them, something immediate happens. Pressure drops. Friction disappears. You get relief. That relief is an instant reward. And instant rewards train the driver far more efficiently than delayed punishments. That is why procrastination repeats. Not because you are irrational, because the system is doing what systems do. It repeats what reduces pressure quickly. But wait, you have been future you. You have reached Monday. You have reached after lunch. You have reached properly. And when you arrived, it turned out tomorrow was just now again. Same mind, same friction, same system. So why does the mind keep believing the same lie? Why does it regenerate even when you know the ending? Because the driver does not learn the way the narrator thinks it does. It does not update like a careful analyst. It updates like a fast pattern matcher. It learns in snapshots. And the snapshot it cares about is this. Avoidance works. It reduces pressure immediately. So it repeats. And then the narrator does something critical. It creates a story to explain what happened. A story that protects coherence. I work better under pressure. I needed more time to think. I was not ready yet. The story does not cause the procrastination. The story covers it. And then the system does something worse. Why does the same mistake feel reasonable every time you make it? Because procrastination does not feel like failure in the moment. It feels like a rational adjustment, a small delay, a temporary detour, a choice that keeps options open. That feeling is the clue. The mind does not protect truth. It protects coherence. It prefers a smooth story over an accurate model. So procrastination becomes a story generator. The actions are automatic. The story comes afterward. And the story has one job: maintain the illusion that you are the kind of person who chooses. That is why procrastination often comes with self-justification. Not because you are lying on purpose, because the system needs a story that makes the behavior feel intentional. And it will always find one, even if it contradicts your history, even if the evidence says the opposite, because evidence is not what the system protects. It protects identity. It protects the feeling of being the author. So procrastination is not simply doing nothing. It is trading an uncomfortable uncertainty for a comforting narrative. Relief now, explanation later. And once coherence becomes the priority, action becomes optional. Because a coherent story can substitute for progress. Planning can substitute for doing. Thinking can substitute for acting. A perfect internal simulation can replace reality. Now here is the key transition. If procrastination is driven by immediacy, relief, and coherence, then the environment matters more than you think. Because the environment determines what is immediate, what is easy, what is available as escape. And that is where the illusion of control collapses. Here's the part most people miss. Why does the easiest thing always win? The obvious answer is because it is easier. But that is not an explanation. That is a description. The real question is why ease has so much power. Why does low friction dominate your intentions like gravity? Because the driver does not scan your values. It scans the landscape. It chooses from what is in front of you. And what is in front of you is not neutral. Because the modern environment is not designed to sit quietly while you struggle. It is designed to respond. The moment your attention wavers, something calls you. A vibration, a badge, a red dot, a new tab, a suggested video, a headline that implies urgency without meaning. And this matters because the driver is not philosophical. It is opportunistic. It does not ask, is this important? It asks, is this available? The phone is always available. The feed is always available. The exit is always available. So leaving becomes automatic. You do not need a decision. You only need a moment of friction, and the system will complete the rest. That is why procrastination often feels like you blinked. You were about to start, then you were somewhere else. And when you try to locate the exact point it happened, you cannot, because it was not one choice. It was a cascade. One small default stacked on another, and every default had a tiny reward attached. Not pleasure, relief. The pressure dropped, the uncertainty disappeared. The blank page stopped staring at you. And here is the strangest part. The distractions do not even need to be enjoyable. They only need to be easier than beginning. That is the bar, not happiness, not entertainment, ease, which means the environment does not have to tempt you with something amazing. It only has to offer something less demanding than the task. And in an environment with infinite exits, the driver always finds one. Not because you lack discipline, because the exits are structurally louder than the work. The work asks for you. The exits grab you. And the system obeys what grabs first. Your phone does not offer one distraction. It offers thousands. Each one costs almost nothing to begin. No setup, no uncertainty, no chance of failing, just immediate engagement, immediate feedback, immediate relief. And when the landscape offers that, the driver takes it. Not because it is evil, because it is the default. That is why procrastination feels like drifting. Because it does not feel like one dramatic decision. It is a sequence of tiny defaults. One click, one tab, one just a second, and the moment you take the exit, you are rewarded. Pressure drops. Discomfort dissolves. The system learns. This exit works. So it becomes faster next time. And that is why the most frustrating part of procrastination is this. You can understand the mechanism. You can predict the consequences. And the behavior still happens. Because understanding is not the steering wheel. It is just another thought. But wait, if procrastination is structural, if it is defaults and relief and landscape, then why does urgency sometimes break it instantly? Why can a looming deadline snap you out of weeks of avoidance in a single afternoon? That feels like proof of control. That feels like proof that discipline was possible the whole time. So what is happening there? That is the clue. Urgency does not give you motivation. It changes the decision system. Because procrastination only works when later feels available, when you can store consequences in the future. A deadline collapses that storage space. It compresses the future into the present. It makes consequences immediate. And once consequences become immediate, the valuation rule flips. Now the cost of avoidance is felt now. Now relief is no longer found in distraction. Distraction becomes pressure. So you do not suddenly become a better person. The system simply responds to new conditions. The driver did not become moral. It became constrained. Under constraint, behavior changes. Not because of will, because of structure. Now let's bring this together, because the full picture is the real answer. Procrastination is not about time. It is not even about self-control. It is the structure of how your mind makes decisions. Procrastination isn't just delay. It's the structure of how behavior gets selected. You think there is one you choosing, a single commander inside your head, a rational agent who selects behavior based on priorities. Fine. That is a comforting story. But procrastination exposes the real architecture. There is the narrator, the part that can explain, the part that can plan, the part that can say, this matters. And there is the driver, the part that selects the next action. Not based on meaning, but based on immediacy, based on friction, based on the fastest reduction of pressure in the present moment. Plans are produced by the system that talks. Actions are selected by the system that defaults. That is the reframe, not laziness, not character. A mismatch between two decision processes operating on different rules. Now test it against reality. If this model is real, it should predict behavior. And it does. Here is proof number one. The preference flip, $100 today versus $110 tomorrow. Then $100 in 30 days versus 110 inches, 31. Same gap, different choice. That is not personality. That is architecture. Your preferences shift when immediacy is involved, which means your values are not the stable core you think they are. They are outputs that depend on timing. Here is proof number two. The deadlines snap, weeks of avoidance, then sudden intense action. People interpret that as control returning. But the conditions changed. The future storage space collapsed. Later stopped feeling available. The driver responded. The system did not become disciplined. It became constrained. Urgency did not create virtue. It created immediacy. And the third proof is the most disturbing one. Awareness does not stop procrastination. If procrastination were just a lack of knowledge, seeing it would fix it. But people can narrate it while it happens. I am doing it again. I am avoiding it. This is ridiculous. And the behavior continues. That means the narrator is not the controller, because the narrator can observe the driver without overriding it. That is not how a single unified chooser behaves. That is how layered systems behave. The top layer explains, the lower layer moves. And the top layer mistakes explanation for control, which is why procrastination feels like betrayal. Like something takes over, but nothing takes over. The default system simply wins, because it gets there first. It does not ask permission. It responds to friction. Now here is the cleanest way to say it. You do not procrastinate because you do not care. You procrastinate because caring creates pressure. Pressure increases friction. Friction triggers escape. That is the mechanism. Caring does not automatically solve procrastination. Caring often amplifies it because it raises the stakes of the outcome. And higher stakes make starting feel more dangerous. So the driver searches for relief, not because it hates you, because it is doing what it was built to do. Reduce immediate pressure. Now, this is the part that destroys the comforting version of reality. The version where thinking is a tool you control, where you can simply decide to be different, and the system obeys. Because procrastination reveals something else. Thinking is not a neutral instrument you operate. Thinking is an environment you live inside. It determines what feels urgent. It determines what feels real. It determines what you notice and what you ignore. And that is why intelligence does not immunize you. The system that can explain the pattern is not the system that executes behavior. So you can be highly aware, highly articulate, and still drift. Awareness becomes commentary, not control. So procrastination is not the mystery, it is the symptom. The deeper truth is about thinking itself. Thinking isn't a tool you control. It's a system that controls what you notice. Reason isn't designed to be right. It's designed to be fast enough. Your mind doesn't search for truth. It searches for coherence. Not comfort, truth.